Welcome, everyone, to Into the Obscure, a podcast about all things obscure, whether it be movies, video games, cultural events, roadside attractions, doesn't matter. We're here to talk about it. And this week, we have a new theme we're going with, and it is going to be about how much we love crafting.
Witchcraft.
Yes, yeah. No, so we're taking on a bit of a cosmic horror Lovecraft-esque type of episode this week. We have a few different things to discuss in terms of movies and video games and things like that. And who knows, maybe we'll go off on a tangent because we typically do that from time to time. It happens.
Uncommon.
It happens.
It's not uncommon.
Y'all don't see it half the time because we do edit these occasionally, but
The power of not live streaming.
exactly. That's why we chose to do it this way. But yes, so this week, kind of the main discussion topics on the docket. We have we have a movie that is a continuation of the Kostanski experience, actually, known as The Void. This one was a little bit out of left field. This one kind of took a completely different direction than what we're used to in terms of Kostanski, except in terms of visuals. Visuals, it kind of held the same thing with the kind of art department design work that you get from a typical Kostanski film. Now, I had seen The Void before myself. I watched it back when it first came out in 2016, but Wingles here hadn't seen it yet. Wingles, what were your first impressions of the movie?
I thought it was really good. I mean, first going into it, you had a really hard time telling that it was a Steve Kostanski film, but after you started to get to where there were more monsters and it started to evolve, it really started you really started to see a lot of his practical effects and things go into it. It definitely had, it was very clearly based in the 80s or 90s. I guess 90s. And then going in through it, you could definitely, it definitely kept with that same theme of him being in basing all of his stuff as a 80s horror movie or 90s horror movie sort of genre. But I really liked the movie. It definitely had some twists that you weren't really expecting. It starts off a little extreme, and then you kind of understand why it started out the way it was. I don't know. I don't know if we want to do any spoilers or not. But the opening scene is two guys chasing down a lady, and they light her on fire. They basically knock her out and light her on fire. You're like, what is going on? And then the movie kind of starts from there, and it's there's a lot of twists to it, and it's just a really well written film. It really comes together.
Yeah, so a lot of people actually look at The Void as one of the prime examples of what a cosmic horror / Lovecraftian movie should be. There are obviously some different. The way people look at cosmic horror, sometimes it's different. A lot of people look at it as fear of the unknown, insanity and things. Actually, kind of a little tangent here is that the TV show Chernobyl, a lot of people actually viewed that as a real good example of what cosmic horror was, because it was this impending doom that you couldn't see coming, which I thought was an interesting take. But when it comes to the sheer visuals, it was probably in my opinion, it's probably the best take I've seen in terms of Lovecraftian cosmic horror that I've seen. Granted, you have your typical, your kind of tentacle, tendril things showing up at certain points. You got your cultists. It kind of nails all of the individual, what you would consider cosmic horror, Lovecraft-esque.
Checks all the boxes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's how I'd put it. Checks all the boxes. And to your point, yeah, it goes 0 to 100 real quick. Because
it starts at 100.
Yeah.
There's no 0.
there was no 0 was The Void, and then it was all right, we're at 100, let's go. But yeah, it's a really interesting film. I've been a big fan of it. I've been a champion for it. I was really excited to actually get to sit and watch it with you and kind of go over it. And watching it back all these years later, because it came out in 2016, which, when you say 2016, doesn't feel like a long time ago, but that was 6 years ago. So it's been a while. But I haven't seen it since then.
Existential dread,
which is perfect for this theme, right? This that's on brand. But one of the things was, back when I watched it back in 2016, I wasn't really into the whole cosmic horror Lovecraft thing at the time. And all these years later, I've gotten more and more into it. And going back and watching it, it really kind of solidified its place as that for me, as like a top tier cosmic horror film. Because again, as is with most Kostanski projects, costume design and creature design and everything, the practical effects were amazing. Because that's where that's I think where me and you have both kind of fallen in love with these projects, is the practical effects. You know, like where all of these, like where instead of CGI everything, it's like, no, there's a puppeteer and a lot of mechanical crap going on and whatnot. One of the big ones obviously was like kind of the first quote unquote monster we got to see. Kind of went off the deep end again, avoiding spoiler territory here, but there was a nurse, and that nurse became a thing, and that thing was terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
It was probably, I mean, if I'm being honest, I would say it's probably one of the more unsettling looking creatures in recent memory, just because of the practical effects. You know, like in like recent movies, because even though CGI has come so far, you could still tell it's CGI. You know, like you can still tell that's computer generated. So this particular creature, it really stood out to me as something that was like, it kind of set the tone, because it happened early on. Like, it happened early in the movie. And it really set the tone how the rest of it was going to go, and it did. It progressed. It didn't get very much more outlandish in terms of costume design, but there was still a lot of intricate costume design that came along later on that was really good.
Yeah, one thing I liked about that too is it sort of stuck to sort of some of the earlier horror movie tropes of, and this just might be a practical effects thing, but it stuck to a lot of the earlier horror movie tropes of not showing the whole monster, leaving some things up to your imagination, and really just like building some dread with it, and building on the idea of like, you don't really know what's coming, you don't really know what it is or what it's capable of, because it's sort of stalking them in the halls, and they don't exactly know what's going on, and people are coming up missing, and they're having issues, and it's just like they definitely did a very good job of like making you feel the discomfort that the main character was feeling.
Oh, for sure. And that's something I'm glad you mentioned the main character, because I would like to take a minute to actually discuss how out of the ballpark this dude knocked that role. Like,
oh yeah,
we were sitting there watching, you know, and when me and Wingles watch a movie together, we'll sit there and kind of like start analyzing a lot of like the smaller details and things like that. And there were so many little details in this movie that really stood out. Like Wingles mentioned earlier, that the aesthetic was a lot more like 80s, 90s style. Everything, the box fan. Like, there was a box fan in a room that was very 90s looking. There were all kinds of like little things here and there that gave it that aesthetic. And then the main character, the protagonist, Daniel, I believe was his name. Daniel was the cop.
I think so.
The actor that played him, which it escapes me right now, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he killed it with all the little subtleties. Like, there was a very intense phone call he gets. We won't go over the details of the phone call, but in that phone call, as it's getting more tense, you see just his hand tightening its grip on the handset. You can see the veins popping out and how hard he's grasping it. Little things like that. There was the moment with the gun. Whenever he did there was the traumatic thing that happened. So his supervisor took his gun, and it set up a moment where that ended up actually playing. Like, there were so many things that were setting up for things later that just it flowed so seamlessly, made it such a great job.
Yeah, they did a really good job of later on, as later on in the movie, they did things that would set up why the main character was at a disadvantage, and why he was struggling, and why he was having a hard time, and it was always leading to like dropping like what is the term where it's like where you can predict what's going on. Like, it was so many little foreshadowing. That's it. And there were so many little things of like, if you sat and watched, and like, probably if you went back and watched it a second time, you'd probably be able to go through and go, oh, that's what they were leading to, and that's what and there were and on top of that, there were so many accuracies with the costume, with the office, with things that were in places that it was like they never told you it was the like late 80s, early 90s, but you just kind of knew based on like if you were alive in that time and you had grown up with some of the stuff from that era, that is like, oh, I had that box fan when I was a kid, or I had that same phone when I was a kid, because back then there was not as many options as there are today. But like you go back and you watch it and you're like, all of this stuff, it's like, oh, this is the same linoleum that was in hospitals when I was a kid, and it's like the same decorations, the same everything was put in place, and the set design and the costume design and everything was just on point with making it feel like it was that era.
Yeah, because the more I think about it, there wasn't a single cell phone in that movie, was there?
No,
But
nope.
that's not even something we brought up while watching it. That's just like
Mm-hmm.
now that I'm thinking about it more and more, as we're discussing that it became increasingly obvious what time frame this took place. Never even occurred in the movie that there wasn't a single cell phone to be seen. Like there none. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
another interesting thing.
yeah. Because they were using radios for everything, and like he went and got the radio out of his truck or out of his car to give to someone else so that they could communicate, and it was always like everything really stuck to the theme of not breaking. Like they knew. I don't know. It was like they had a time machine and just went to like a Sears and bought everything that they needed for that movie.
You're not wrong though.
Hmm.
And honestly, like it was one of those things where, in my personal opinion, this is why it stands out as like a Lovecraftian thing. In Act One, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknown, a
Hmm.
lot of we don't really know what's going on. And then in kind of like leading into Act Two, we get more of like, okay, here's the creature stuff. Here's like a little bit more of the dread building because we understand something's going on, even though we don't know exactly what. And then it builds to the finale in Act Three where it all kind of comes to a head and everything kind of makes sense at that point. And
Hmm.
which is such a classic way to write stuff. But if you do it effectively, that's all you need. And I think they did that to an absolute T in this film.
Oh, absolutely. And I think to stick to the Lovecraftian theme, they did a very, very, very good job of showing the mental illness and showing the reasoning and really letting you understand why the things were happening and why the people that were there and like kind of everything that was happening, you kind of I don't want to say empathize because you definitely don't empathize, but you really understood. It really took that idea that I guess like more modern Marvel movies and stuff like that have been doing lately, where it's like they're really making you understand, like really feel why the quote unquote villain was doing what they were doing, or why everything was sort of leading to what it was, and they did a really 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 good job of kind of explaining why everything was happening and how everything was tied together. There is not one single thing in that movie that is not tied to everything else in that movie. And it's just it's a masterpiece. I think it's like Kubrick or something like that who says like there should never be any detail in a movie that doesn't somehow lead to something else. And they absolutely nailed every single detail in that movie led to the next step of the movie or was a factor later on.
Yeah, like the whole idea of like trauma and tragedy played a huge role
Yes.
because this is something you'll see that's very reminiscent in say like Pet Cemetery. The
Hmm.
lengths that someone will go to for a loved one based around a tragedy that's happened to that loved one. So that plays a heavy role in this. Without we're finding great ways of not spoiling this while still discussing the themes. But to compare it to something, I would definitely say it's very Pet Cemetery esque, where a loved one was kind of almost driven to madness over grief because of a
Hmm.
tragedy, and it made so much, and it wasn't just one character. This happened to like there was something that happened to like every character that was involved in
Hmm.
this. Like
Yeah.
something led them down this path, and it was like it was basically like a very similar thing happened to several different characters, and it showed how different people can process how grief can really cause somebody to go over the edge, how grief can cause somebody to be overprotective. And the more I think about it, the more it just all of it makes perfect sense and is a very, very good story being told.
Yeah, this is our since watching it and kind of critiquing it while we were watching it. This is really the first time that we've sat down and started talking about it, and the more we talk about it, the more I'm kind of like, you know what? More and more of this makes sense. I think in that movie they did a really good job of there was a pretty small cast. All of the actors were just on point with the character that they had to be, or that they were supposed to be. And I think just explaining all of their backstory, and you really grew to understand the logic behind everything everyone did. And it was just, they just nailed it. They just absolutely nailed it. For being an indie film and being a lower budget film, like that genre of movie, there's really, really nothing that Hollywood's doing that I could really say is done any better. And I would almost say, like kind of getting the vibe is Stranger Things. It definitely had like a Stranger Things vibe with like the time period and just the sort of things that were going on. Maybe less action movie than Stranger Things, but for what, it's like an hour and a half movie, they really tied it together. They did an amazing job.
Yeah, they kind of squeezed a lot in there without making it feel rushed as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of detail because like the more we're talking about it, like you said, the more we're talking about, the more details we're kind of remembering. I mean, heck, we got entire story arcs of several different people, and none of it felt
Mm-hmm.
right. They managed to tie them into scenes that they were experiencing to make it make sense,
Yeah,
which is
and they,
something you don't
and
see very often.
yeah, and they did a really good job of explaining backstories without a single flashback. I don't know the first time I've seen it. That has to be the first time I've seen a movie where they really made you understand someone's, like, I think since like Lost or whatever was in the past that really made flashbacks popular. I feel like everything's a flashback now, and they just through like the natural dialogue of the story, they really explained like somebody was acting a certain way, and it kind of explained how they felt toward another person, and like later they would give little bits of like, this is what happened. Like they would plant little seeds all along the way, and did just such an amazing job of explaining like why everyone who they were. They gave just enough detail to really understand the relationship between everyone, and it was just done so well.
Yeah, and there were some things that like even we started discovering that like lies, like not I don't guess necessarily lies, but like not whole truths were being told that got revealed without necessarily being just outright said. Because there was like a little bit of confusion about a relationship between two of the people in the movie that turned out to be related, but they didn't make it very clear that they were. As a matter of fact, they made it almost seem as though they weren't. But there was a scene setting where there was a small hallucination where there was a framed picture on the wall that really was like, ah, okay.
Hmm.
Okay, now I see. And then there was like it was a very small, very short interaction between those two people that was like, oh my god. So this is why
Hmm.
this whole thing is happening
Yeah.
on their side. So it was like those little. I mean,
Hmm.
that whole scene was what, 3 minutes, and it opened up a
If
whole
that.
thing. Yeah, it made everything make sense.
Hmm.
So massive kudos. Like as much as I love all of Kostanski's goofy stuff, like Manborg and Psycho Gorman, and we even watched, was it Cowboys and American Tail after we did the last episode, which was really funny. This movie really was like, you would think to say something along the lines of out of his comfort zone, but I wouldn't. It seemed like he knew exactly what he was doing.
Hmm.
Knew exactly what he was
Yeah.
doing. It's in my personal opinion my second favorite Kostanski anything we've seen behind Psycho Gorman, because that one just holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Psycho Gourmet's the one that really opened the door to us even knowing who he was, and then took us down this whole rabbit hole of 2 episodes ago. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just such a good movie. It's one of those ones where you look at it and it's like that movie did not deserve to be that good. Like like if you're looking for a horror movie, and it's not jump scares, it's more builds on you like dread than it is anything else. If you're looking for a good horror movie, definitely check out The Void. I can't say enough of how good that movie is.
For sure. Now, to that point though, like not everything out there that's quote unquote Lovecraftian or quote unquote cosmic horror is a slow build of dread with no action. Sometimes there are video games out there, right, with plenty of action.
Yes, I actually want to start with a video game I played recently, because it also sticks to the early '90s theme and the nostalgia that the nostalgia that comes along with that. I recently played Forgive Me, Father, which while that sounds sexual, it is not.
Right. Now, if they'd have went with a title like "Forgive Me, Daddy," that would have been a little bit. I feel like
Ooh,
there's a missed
ooh.
opportunity there. Now that I think about it.
They'll come out with a mod later.
Yeah,
So
it's the one
so
with 50% more tentacles, is what it is.
yes, yeah. So Forgive Me, Father is actually a Lovecraftian style game that is very, very similar to the early days of Doom. It's like the 2.5D. It has a very, very unique like comic book looking style. I would say the difference between this game and like the older Doom games is this is actually a lot more fast paced. Uh, it's actually a lot more fast paced than like the older Doom. So it's kind of the pacing of the modern Doom games, but the style of the older ones, and it's really cool. It really they have a good variety of like skins and stuff for the enemies that you fight. I'm about 2/3 of the way through. I think there's 3 bosses, and upon recording this, I'm at the second boss. But they do a really good job of really just giving the Lovecraftian feel and just hammering away on the nostalgia feel. I feel like most of the games that I bring to the table are just built on nostalgia. I feel like I played 10 games when I was a little kid, and now I'm just trying to find people that recreated those.
Yeah, because this one looks
but
like it looks like a very like a very quintessential boomer shooter style.
mhm.
From what I saw, because I was watching you play it, talking about that comic book aesthetic, that was really really good. Like it was really fun to watch, just on the aesthetic alone.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's really cool. I will say, like getting further into it, it did get a little bit repetitive for a while. So like it's a very fun game. I really really like it. I will say though that kind of some of my criticisms of it is the voice acting in it is not great. It's a little stiff for somebody that's going around. Yeah, they higher Rev. The voice acting's a little stiff. It's a little monotone for somebody that's kind of like going through a Lovecraftian hellscape. Um, and I will say that the game starts to feel a little bit repetitive. And one thing that was kind of weird to me is it has like really intense music, like the more modern Doom games. It has like the hard rock and stuff like that for like the big fight scene, the big fight areas and stuff like that. But I started to notice like the further along you got, the more that music just didn't really line up with when the fights were happening. It's like sometimes you'd kill a couple things, the music would start, and then you'd be done, and then you have to like walk around and look for some stuff. Um, and you wouldn't really find what you're looking for. It is kind of a weird situation. And sometimes the music you'd be in a huge battle and there'd be absolutely no music. So it was just kind of like hit or miss of whether or not the music was playing, and it didn't seem to sync up right. I will say it has a really cool system for upgrading weapons and stuff. So all your weapons have like skill trees associated with it, and when you level up, you can level up a gun like most games. But it actually depending on what upgrade you get for the weapons, it does like different modifications. So I have a shotgun that's completely covered in tentacles that does extra damage, and it's really cool. It's a really fun game. I've really enjoyed it up to this point. I have some critiques, but that would absolutely does not ruin the fun and really enjoying the game. Plus, it has a lot of the classic Doom tropes of like hidden things in the map and having like special guns that you can find that just absolutely mow enemies down. And it definitely, if you really enjoyed the old Doom games back when you were a kid, you would really enjoy this game.
So, in terms of story, what's
Hmm.
kind of like the basic foundation? Because I haven't actually seen anything on like the basic foundation of the story of the game. So is there like an actual plot line going on in the background, or is it just kind of throw you in and you go?
Yeah, so there is a plot line. My understanding of the plot line is there are 2 characters you can pick, and my understanding of the plot line is depending on which character you pick, you're going to rescue the other one, or like the other one is doing something maybe nefarious that you're going to stop them. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not quite far enough to exactly know like where they're going with it or what they're doing with it, but it almost seems like the other character that you don't pick is somehow chasing after something that's like with a lot of the Lovecraftian style storylines. It's like they're in grief and they're trying to create something and causing a much bigger problem. So it seems as though that the other character that you don't pick, you're going to stop them from creating a much larger problem. If I were to guess, I don't know. I'm really bad at paying attention to stories when I play games.
To be fair, I mean the way you describe it, it actually, I mean, it lines up perfectly with that style of game, because that's there was another game that was similar to that, but instead of picking characters, the character that you're trying to stop this world-ending event, and it was called Splatterhouse. I don't know about the originals. So Splatterhouse originally came out like way back in the 90s, I think. But they made like a remake for 360, and the main character looks almost like a hulked up Jason. He's got this mask, and it's like a murder mask. It controls you, it like makes you big, and you wield a machete. But there's a lot of somebody out of grief was trying to cause essentially a world-ending cataclysm event because of trying to invoke the great old ones that you always see in all of these things. So it definitely seems like, I mean, if that's what you're pulling from it so far, it definitely seems like it's heading down that kind of like cosmic horror trope. Which again, if it does it right, that's that's exactly what it needs to be, right? Like,
oh, absolutely.
So you're excited,
absolutely.
So you're liking it so far.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I plan on finishing it. I just haven't. I haven't got that far yet. I've been bouncing around a few games at the moment, but yeah, it's definitely definitely a good time. I would definitely recommend checking it out, and it's like brand new. I think it just came out when this airs a couple weeks ago.
yeah, I do recall it being very new, because I think I got tagged in a tweet on it like the day it came out. One of our friends, Danny K, he tagged me in it, was like, hey, Rev, this seems like your kind of thing. And lo and behold, here it is. Like, you immediately got on it, like, right after.
Speaking of Lovecraftian games, we have another one that we spoke a little bit about in the Dread X collection episode. That I think I watched a little bit of it. I think I watched the Dread X version when you played it. I don't think I watched the full version, or I caught bits and pieces. So it's Lovecraftian, but a completely different direction than anything that we've talked about so far.
Oh yeah. So imagine you take the cosmic powers of the great old ones and combine them with the dating sim and a guy that just wants to smooch. And that's where you get Sucker for Love. Now Sucker for Love, which you better have watched the Dread X collection episode by now. If you haven't, go back and watch it after this, but we're going to discuss a little bit more. The Dread X collection had a game in the second Dread X collection, which we actually mentioned was called Lovecrafting. The whole thing was actually kind of cosmic horror centric. And there was a game in there that really kind of stood out, and it was called Sucker for Love. And in this game, in the Dread X collection version, you are just essentially trying to smooch a Cthulhu-esque being named Lynetta, who is voiced by Michelle or Michaela Laws. I can't remember if it's Michelle or Michaela, but amazing voice actress. Killed it with this role. And then it got such good traction that they said, hey, Akabaka, which is the name of the dev of that particular game, what would you think about making this like a full thing? Which they said, all right. And so we ended up getting like a full-length Sucker for Love. And when I tell you I was anticipating this game with every fiber of my being, that's not an exaggeration. I was so excited for this game to come out. And when it did not disappoint. So, in the full version, you get to try to smooch multiple Lovecraftian eldritch beings. And one of them is Lynetta. Lynetta makes a return. And then there's Esther, which is the King in Yellow from the Lovecraftian lore. And God, is she a snob. She's a snobby character. Like, while Lynetta is like really kind of cute in whatever until she becomes dark, Esther not so much. much more of a snot-nosed brat. But it's really cool because this game, they actually took it in a whole different, or not a whole different direction, but they expanded upon it so much that there are actually multiple endings you can get now. One where, like there's one where you can get the typical just, smooch Lynetta. Then there's the one where you actually try to appeal to Esther. Then there's the one where you try to balance dating both of them. Then there's what happens if you get caught by one or the other. And then they actually added a third character that you have to find secrets within the game to unlock her. And it's Nyarlathotep, which is a play on Nyarlathotep, which I believe's nickname was Crawling Chaos, which actually Nyarlathotep is one of my favorite Lovecraft short stories. So I was already like, okay, give me this one. And I found out she was a gigantic cat woman, and I was like, now I don't know how to feel about myself, but I'm all in. But no,
well, this is unlocking new kinks.
Right? It's like achievement unlocked. Rev's new kink. One-eyed cat women that are 7.5 feet tall. But no, it's actually really interesting because every character that you try to smooch comes with a different like book that you have to go in and read spells out of, which you can't even understand the spells because they're in like old Eldritch, like outer god speak, which is pretty cool. But one of like Lynetta's is like real cute and pink, Esther's is yellow, and then of course Nyarlathotep's is blue because she's blue. And you actually do have to go through and perform rituals in very specific steps because if you mess them up, it can alter your story, it can cut your game short. So you actually do have to be paying attention to what's going on, especially in the Nyarlathotep one, because you get sent. Her entire purpose is to just drive you insane. The other two try to get you to like worship them essentially, but Nyarlathotep's like, no, I'm going to drive you crazy. And so you're going through trying to perform all these rituals in such a way that it makes it to where you don't go mad. But what's weird about it is you don't know which one you're supposed to perform until you start looking at your surroundings. It doesn't tell you, hey, perform this one. You have to be paying attention to what's going on and then be like, okay, this is the one I need to perform. And it gets tough. So whenever you get that extra part unlocked, it gets multitudes more difficult. But it's set up in a very similar way as like most other dating sims where you kind of have choices you can make and stuff like that. Everything's 2D, almost anime looking. So the aesthetic is very, very typical to your visual novel dating sim style. But the storyline, like the way the story is set up and the things you can do within it, it's really, really well done. And still to this day, Akabaka, the dev, which if you go follow them on Twitter, I believe they're Chromatos dev, because they also have a game called Chromatos, which is like CHROMATOSE, I believe. It'll be linked below in the description. But yes, they still are making these eldritch beings into like, you know, dating sim anime girl stuff. Like we're getting The Color Out of Space, which is actually a Nicolas Cage movie that's Lovecraftian, which I really cannot wait for you to watch, but maybe we'll do a watch party for that one, who knows. But anyways, yeah, so Sucker for Love was actually diving into the full game was a lot of fun. It was really well done. The voice acting was really good. I played it on day one, so there were, as is typical with a lot of indie games, there were a few bugs here and there, but nothing that was like game breaking. It was overall a very good experience. It was a lot of fun. It was funny, had a lot of laughs. Ended up turning, having a lot of fun in chat with it because we streamed it. All in all, great game. Would recommend. But I would say if you're not entirely sure, pick up the Dread X Collection 2 first, then give it a test out the smaller version and some of the other Lovecraftian things that are in that one as well. And then that way you can kind of get your whole cosmic horror fill, if you will.
So what would you say was your favorite ending? Maybe.
Ooh, that's a tough one, actually.
Yeah.
I would say, I don't know. Okay, so I'm a hopeless romantic, and I think
dating both.
Right. No, I think probably the Lynetta, where I smooched Lynetta at the end, because it was like I remembered Lynetta from the original in the Dread X collection, so I was like, but there's one where like you cast a certain spell that turns her into a little tiny squid. And that one was pretty funny. It wasn't as romantic, but yeah, I think having Lynetta suck my face off was probably still my favorite.
Ooh.
I'll be the first one to say though.
Forgive me, Daddy.
Yeah, forgive me. Exactly. And here we are. We're back. Now I would say though, I come to find out apparently I'm a little bit against the grain here in terms of like popular opinions. I despised Esther with all of my being. She was so obnoxious. Like a lot of people loved her, for that very reason. But I'm over here like, God, I hate you. Give me my tentacle mouthed Lynetta back. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
Well,
was not the popular opinion there.
Yeah, you have an easygoing wife, so you're not you're not about the pain in the ass ones.
Yeah, that's 100%. That's probably exactly what it was. Was that I saw more of my wife in Lynetta than I did in Esther, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I like her more.
Mm-hmm.
But I still like Nan Lathotep, the most 8 foot tall. She's also like, what's crazy is she's like clearly like designed. All of them are obviously older because they're eldritch outer gods.
Mm-hmm.
But she is like designed to be older. Like she has an older sounding voice. You call her Auntie Nyan Nyan. And all kinds. Yeah, it's like so strange. But I was like, man, I'm into this. But yeah, so in terms of how eldritch things and horror or Lovecraftian horror, cosmic horror, whatever. What's crazy is like as we've kind of gone over these things that we've talked about today, there's a lot out there. You know, like whenever you start actually looking into it, there's so much out there that's about it. Like I'll even talk about another game I played that's very, very like some people have played Call of Cthulhu. Like that's an actual game that has a scene ripped directly from Godzilla 2014 in it. Then there's one called The Sunken City that's kind of popular, but there's more obscure indie ones out there. There's one called The Shore, which is another one I would highly recommend. It's more of the slow build kind of dread building. There's a walking obelisk with a beehole. That was kind of cool in it. But
ooh,
yeah.
Did you touch it? Did you touch it?
I tried, but there is a video. It's on my TikTok, and I think it's even like on maybe my YouTube Shorts. But yeah, there's straight up a clip of me just staring at this walking obelisk, and next thing you know, it's like, oh my god, it's got a butthole. You know, because it turns around and it's like.
Did you try to vomit in the butthole?
Oh god!
Or is that exclusively for horses?
That is exclusively for horses within the Fuzz dungeon. But there's also another reptilian beast in that game that I said, "Show me that cloaca," because that's a running gag between us. But yeah, so the Shore was actually a really interesting one because, believe it or not, again, tragic ending to a loved one, trying to figure some stuff out and everything. Lo and behold, here we are in this story again. But again, it was really well written for us. What you would consider a walking sim. This one does have some stuff that can chase you, but you don't fight back. Like it's one of those. It's like one of those like survival walking sim style, and it builds up some dread at some certain points. Like it builds up some points where you're kind of like, I'm not turning around right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll say in a lot of scary games that I played or horror games that I played, I feel like a lot of times the ability to fight back takes away from takes away from being scared so much. Because I can't tell you how many times I played a scary game that started off scary and then just ended up being a first-person shooter.
Oh, 100%. We've seen entire franchises do that with, like, say, Resident Evil. Resident Evil 5 and 6 just became action games that just so happened to have zombies in them. They weren't scary at all. There was another one too.
Fear was like that. Fear was like that, where it started off scary, and then by the end of it, it's like I can kill everything with a harpoon and a shotgun.
Yep.
So it's like nothing really. It's just run through and shoot everything.
Yeah, and another game very similar, a similar vein. This one was less you couldn't fight back. But I also have that same opinion on, like, say, if something can chase you and kill you, if you have to run through that several times, the rest of the game becomes progressively less scary. And that happened with Layers of Fear. Layers of Fear 1 was amazing in the fact that, like, if something caught you, you didn't go back and have to do the whole thing over again. It would alter your story, but that's it. The second one, you were being chased by this, like, gigantic amorphous blob. And certain points, if you got caught by it, you'd have to go back, try again. And it loses a lot of its fear there, so it becomes more reliant on the. What's that?
It pulls you out of the experience if you have to replay something or redo something.
Yes, that's a very good point, because whenever you start going through, it just becomes repetitive at that point, and it starts trying to lend itself more to like the stress induced, like, because there's a difference in like stress induced and dread built, you know, like, and that's where you get like the stress induced of, okay, I just don't want to fail again, so I don't have to go back and start over, as opposed to the dread build where it's like, I just don't want something to catch me because it's probably going to make me poo myself.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Or make me
Abs-
scream like our buddy Sky.
yeah. Yeah, he's a good screamer. We'll bring him on and talk about scary indie games around Halloween or something. I feel like that'd be a good thing.
100% agree with that. I
Because I don't know
100%
anybody
agree.
that I don't know anybody that knows scary games better than him.
No, absolutely. Yeah, he's amazing, and watching his clips always bring a smile to my face. Like, if you ever want to just laugh, that's the guy.
Oh yeah, I can't even tell you how many times I've been in his chat and somebody will come in and be like, "I saw your clips on Instagram or TikTok or something else," and they're like, "I didn't believe it was real till I came in."
Right? Yeah, yeah. You get in there
They
and you
thought he was
actually
acting. It's like, no,
experience.
no, no. He's. I'm genuinely concerned for his health.
Yeah, dude, like I mean, the dude gets cardio just sitting there because he just like it's like it's almost like high intensity or high impact intense impact training or whatever the hit training because he'll be sitting there.
Yeah.
It'll be normal and then bam, it'll spike that heart rate all the way up for a few seconds and it'll go back to normal for a bit.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
but But I believe that's going to be it for us this week on Into the Obscure Lovecraftian episode, which I'm sure we'll end up doing more of those in the future because it's just everywhere. So it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to avoid. Yeah. So like there'll definitely be more Lovecraftian cosmic horror or eldritch horror, whatever you prefer to call it, coming down the
Mm-hmm.
pipes eventually.
Yeah, yeah. I think. I mean, there's no shortage of games, and there'll always be new ones. I mean, Forgive Me, Father just came out when this airs a couple weeks ago, and I'm sure there'll be no shortage of them in the future, and we'll definitely stay on top of it because I think that's basically a genre that both of us are pretty into. We both enjoy that genre quite a bit.
Oh, for sure. Yep.
Yeah.
But until next time, thank you for watching. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did, and we'll see you next week.